待会儿给我拿钱收完，给我拿收完。然后没人收回来，我操，干了最多呗。喂，你不要不录啊。
So we just landed in Cox's Bazar to go this afternoon to see the world's largest refugee camp with almost 1 million people locked away in this camp here. The camp's been here for many, many decades. A lot of people have been here for up to 30 years. But for the last 6 years there's been at least another 800,000 plus Rohingya. So we're here to learn the story about them, hear about their persecution, why they fled, but particularly to have a look at the conditions of the camp and talk about what the future looks like for them. I don't really know what to expect. I've seen some documentaries and seen all the photos and so on of the temporary structures, and of course it was not too long ago, in the last couple of years, there was a major fire that went through the camp and people perished, and just last week before we got here there actually was a cyclone. So every time, the monsoon season every year, but also those natural disasters just wipes out the accommodation, wipes out more people, makes the circumstances even worse. So we're heading this afternoon for the first time.
165.
Should be 165 and another 5 persons mission visitor from the Australian High Commission.
So the numbers here are just mind-blowing. Nothing that people in Australia would even be able to comprehend until you come here and just try and take some of it in. Almost 1 million people here. The vast majority of 800,000 have been here for 6 years already, almost 7 years. Households with 4 or 5 people, I think the average here in this camp is, they're saying. Tiny huts here, bamboo made, and over 200,000 families across 34 camps in only 24 square kilometres. One of the most densely populated, not just refugee camps, but most densely populated parts of the world. Just full of houses on top of each other. You go underneath there, it's incredibly oppressive heat. You can't see from the outside, but under there there's just people everywhere.
So this is the, you can say, the average standard shelter size.
So coming in here and seeing, the rudimentary nature of it. I mean, people have been living here for 6 years. Is that right? These shelters have been here for quite a long time.
Yes.
And this is just concrete floor, some bamboo, a tiny place to make some food, and the whole family is living in this environment.
From the very beginning, it was, instructed by the Bangladesh government to build these shelters in the bamboo made.
Right.
So that is what we instructed to build for the refugees.
That's all that's allowed.
So that's why there is nothing outside, and this
No.
is all they have.
This is all they have. Thank you for coming and saying hello to us. The smiles on these little kids and coming up and offering us biscuits and things when they have so very little, nothing actually. It just makes your heart break for what's going on here. I asked the mother inside, who understandably didn't want to be on camera, but you've been here for 6 years, just living in this tiny concrete floored thing, and you've got beautiful children, what are your hopes for them? And she said, my only hope is that they can one day have an education. And that's something that every Australian, I think, should reflect on.
This is the largest refugee crisis in our region. These people, the Rohingya, Myanmar, that's traditionally where they've lived for many generations. The problem is the Rohingya were excluded, and so they did become stateless in their own country. And so they didn't have the same rights as other citizens, and that led to literally hundreds of thousands of people fleeing their homes which have subsequently have been destroyed. They can't even go back there anymore. So that means that they're stuck here.
In essence, they've been stuck in this kind of netherworld where the Bangladeshi government would prefer that they return. They can't. And at the same time, doesn't really want to invest in the structures and the systems for them to be able to become educated, or even, as I understand it, in their housing and the structures that they actually live in, that these cyclones and monsoons are hitting and so on.
So this was 1 million people who crossed the border in a very short period of time. It really was an emergency. So to host, Bangladesh is one of the poorest countries in the world, and this is one of the poorest parts of one of the poorest countries. So for them to host 1 million people is quite extraordinary. But because of that, the Bangladeshi government has been very clear that these people will not be able to stay. Ultimately, they have to go back to Myanmar. They are citizens of Myanmar, that's where they want to go back. Well, the problem is they're not recognised as citizens of Myanmar, but they should be. That's their home.
Welcome to WFP Voucher outlet. This is one of the outlet out of 19. We do have 19 outlets across the UP and Tekna. There are two types of sourcing. One is the bulk item like rice, pulse, oilses. This is a different area of Bangladesh sourcing. And for the daily item like perishable items, chickens, veggies, this kind of items, we are sourcing from the local area.
This is the ration per person, $8 US. It used to be 12, and then in the last 12 months went down to 10, and now people have had to adjust to $8 US a month. So if you think from an Australian perspective how much food that actually is, well, none of us would really know. But here you can see it's a bit of rice, salt, vegetable oil, and some chilies, and that's it. That's all that you're eating every day, every month. How do they afford these things?
Beneficiary can bond with the $8, and for extremely vulnerable individuals, we are actually getting additional $3 on top of $8. For the other beneficiaries, they can visit with the $8.
So there's several operators here who compete against each other for kind of selling the groceries to all the people here, to the refugees, who only have $8 per person per month to spend, of course. And here's the fresh vegetables, and if people have enough, if they have a larger family, for example, and they have more times $8, they might be able to get a chicken, and if they were telling us if they can get a couple of eggs per week, you can imagine how huge that is, especially for the little kiddies. What UNHCR is saying in their recent report is that now, because it's only $8 a month, let's remember that's because there's not enough funding from all governments around the world, but of course that has a huge impact on their general health, and that amount, 27 US cents a day, is not up to the minimum standard of nutrition for a human being in the world.
From the official Refugee Camp.
My name is Craig Foster. I'm from Australia. I work mostly in television, and I used to play for Australia in the football team, which is called the Socceroos, the national team.
নহারে নারায় জায়গা আমাদের এস্টাবলিশ করে নিজেকে শিক্ষিত এস্টাবলিশ গ্রাজুয়েট হইনা হারে নয়তো ভালো ফুটবলার হইনা হারে নৌকা খেলে খেলা হইনা হারে
আর দ্বিতীয়ত আমি নিজে একজন ফুটবল প্লেয়ার আমি প্রায় ভালো খেলাইতাম এখন নাই খেলাইতে পারি যারা হারানোর মাঠ নাই আপনি নিজে তো মনোহর ভালো দক্ষ ফুটবল প্লেয়ার হয়ে গেলাই কিন্তু না পারি প্রথমত আর নিজের হ্যাস্তান নাই দ্বিতীয়ত আর এখন ভালো মাঠ নাই গ্রাউন্ড নাই যার হার নাই প্রতিদিন প্র্যাকটিস করি না পারি
You don't have secondary education and you don't have sport. So, what are all the young people and the youth doing here? What do they do every day?
দিন দিন আরো বেশি দিন পরে এখন বর্তমানে ফুটবল প্লেয়ার ওটা দিতে দিন দিন এখন খেলাধুলা নগরীর বিভিন্ন ক্রাইমের মধ্যে জড়িত হয়ে যাবে খোঁজাহারি করে ঝগড়া করে পরিচয় করে এই সমস্ত জায়গার মধ্যে ওনারা লিপ্ত হয়ে যাবে
Many of the youth that we just spoke to in a bit of a youth forum, they were all born here. They spent their entire life here. They can't go outside the fence, and they're just talking about what that does to them, what it does to other kids, the lack of education. They have here in this registered camp, they have primary school, nothing beyond that, and not even any sport. And so many of them, they love football, they love to watch football, and some of them played many, many years ago. But there's so little to do here that they essentially just waste away.
Because of the humanitarian crisis we are facing, our youths are being engaged to the negative activities. People don't have food. They were more traumatized as they were already traumatized and the stressed people. So this can increase the violence and the domestic violence and the conflict around the society. We are always hoping the support from the international community to sustain our life and to make better future for our younger generation, so they can be the people that they want to be, so they can see their dream that they dream, and so they can make their dream too.
So actually you see we have 1,200,000 people living here, and actually we are spreading our support throughout different camps. So actually MSF has 3 different OC are covering more or less all over the camps with specialized clinics or also hospital and primary care center.
And what are the change in patterns and what need are you seeing?
So pregnant ladies are coming in our facilities with nutritional deficiencies. We are also getting child with nutritional deficiencies because the accurate amount of food and the nutrients that requires for each person is not really met actually. Like last month we have at least 260 patients, pregnant lady came for malnutritional, pregnant with malnutritions. We screened out and it is increasing day by day. And if you see our IPD patients in pediatric ward, that is from 6 months to 59 months, the child admission that requires along with malnutrition and complications, it is quite increasing day by day. In April it was only 22, now it is 60.
Everything is amped. I'm assuming that's actually because of underlying malnutrition. Imagine looking at your child and seeing that they would attain a fifth of their potential. Cognitively, behaviorally, emotionally, developmentally, and physically. And that means long term, there's nothing you can do. So even if you refeed them, even if you give them everything now, their brain at 2 is not going to be at 10 what it could have been if it had been fed at 2 months or in utero. It's so urgent, but you're not going to see the effects for a generation. And then we're going to say, oh, I wish I had known. But right now we know if we don't do something now, this generation of children that are growing up impaired, there's not going to be anything we can do about that. So
That's what people need to hear.
I think so.
And it must be difficult with the patients because you have so much need to triage them, so people have to go. You would prefer to keep going, but there's such a...
It's quite increasing every month. We have a diphtheria outbreak, we have cholera outbreak, we have measles outbreak, then we have COVID-19 influx.
Scabies.
One after then is scabies.
Dengue.
Dengue. Not leaving them actually.
You know, what would you say to people on the outside, whether it's in Australia or elsewhere, about what's happening here?
The Rohingya crisis really should be much more addressed to help these people. And I personally feel that Australia should be right in front of the queue to want to help, because Australia is in the region. And I know Rohingya people desperately need a safe place, and Australia has plenty of them.
This is really the front line of what we've seen inside the camp, even in the depths of despair, and this is in the depths here. You still see some incredible people. The real issue is that there's 1 million incredible people sitting behind wire just down the hill here. The amount of human capital that the world is wasting, 1 million people creative, 1 million people with dreams, 1 million people with skills and abilities and intelligence and acumen and passion, who are just sitting there and wasting away because they're not allowed to work, they're not allowed to dream, they're not allowed to study. There was a most beautiful little girl before, just came out and was standing, and I looked at her, and we're used to in Australia, we see children and we smile and hello, and so I automatically smiled, and she didn't smile back, and rightly so. She just looked at me with these big eyes, and she was just looking straight through me, because her world is just totally different to mine and yours. She was just looking, what are you doing here? How are you going to help us? What does this mean to me? You know, my smiles don't come cheap. In Australia, they come cheap. We don't mean it. We smile to each other superficially. We say, hi, how you going? And we barely care there. But here, there is no care. They actually need to be considered as human. And if we consider Rohingya as human, as we should, then all of this is impossible. It's not possible. You cannot put 1 million people in a cage. You wouldn't allow it for yourself? Not a chance in hell, I wouldn't. And yet these people are supposed to accept it? For what reason? The people have all sorts of justifications, but there are none. There's no justification for this. This is inhuman. It's very simple. There's no ambiguity around what's happening here. This has to end. And the world not only can't forget about it, but we need to somehow work out durable solutions for all these people. This can't go on.